All right. Welcome, everyone, to the WPS GHA Contractor Advisory Committee meeting. Today's date is October 24th, 2024, and the time is 5 o'clock Central Time, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. My name is Dr. Brad Stauffer. I am a chiropractic CAC representative in Nebraska and the chair of the Nebraska CAC. Dr. Campos, would you like to introduce yourself as a co-chair?
Sure, thanks, Dr. Stauffer. My name is Dr. Claudia Campos, and I'm a contractor medical director for WPS. Welcome, everybody.
All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. A reminder, the purpose of the CAC engagement meeting is to present the proposed LCDs up for consideration and to take comments from the CAC. Public is welcome to attend in a listen-only capacity today. Just a reminder of the disclosure, your attendance as a CAC member at this meeting implies that you consent to the public disclosure of your opinion and agree that it may be used and will be clearly identified as your opinion within the proposed or final proposed LCDs as discussed. If a CAC member does not consent, please disconnect now. And a reminder, the meeting is being recorded and transcribed. Also wanted to remind participants to aid in transcription. Before you make any comments, please state your name and any conflicts of interest you may have, or state that there are none. Individuals wishing to comment may click on the raised hand icon, press *5 if you're attending by phone. When Mr. Staley calls on you, please make sure that your microphone is on at your end and that your speakers are silenced to prevent echo. CAC members should also remember to follow up any verbal comments in writing at Medicare Policy Comments at WPSIC.com. We'll go on to the proposed LCDs. Dr. Campos, if you would like to go ahead and take those.
Thank you, Dr. Stauffer. Now it is my pleasure to invite our lead WPS CMD, Dr. Denise Nachotsky, to present the policy summaries of the three new multi-MAC LCDs. DL39989, MolDX genetic testing for heritable thoracic aortic disease, policy nurse analyst Michelle McCary. DL39987, MolDX molecular testing for identification and management of hereditary transthyretin amyloidosis. Policy nurse analyst is again Michelle McCary. And DL40022, MolDX non-next generation sequencing tests for the diagnosis of BCR-ABL negative myeloproliferative neoplasms. Policy nurse analyst is Tara Schroeder. Please note that the open comment period for DL39989 and DL39987 is from August 29th, 2024 to December 6, 2024, and for DL40022, it is October 10th, 2024 to November 23rd, 2024. Dr. Nachotsky, you have the floor.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I also would like to take this time to thank all of our CAC members who are attending. It is an evening time, and we know that it's taken a time away from your very busy schedule, so it is very much appreciated. What I'd like to say is, just up front, the three policies that I'll be presenting today are part of the molecular diagnostic program. And what the molecular diagnostic program is, it's a multi-jurisdictional MAC program, of which WPS is a participating MAC. This program researches and is responsible for policy development, coverage, coding, and pricing for molecular diagnostic tests and other molecular pathology services. This team has many subject matter experts in various diverse clinical specialties of the different MACs, including what I think is very important is that we have many clinical pathologists and PhD experts in genetics as we write these policies. So I'm going to proceed with the first one that Dr. Campos noted, which was proposed LCD title DL39989. This is a policy for genetic testing for heritable thoracic aortic disease. Often the acronym is HTAD. And coverage is provided when all of the following criteria are met. Number one, the patient presents with an aortic root or ascending aortic dilatation, aneurysm, or dissection as defined by national consensus guidelines, and at least one of the following are true. Presentation before the age of 60, or presence of syndromic features of Marfan syndrome, Louis-Dietz syndrome, or vascular Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, or family history of thoracic aortic disease or peripheral intracranial aneurysm in a first or second degree relative, or family history of unexplained sudden death at a relatively young age in a first or second degree relative. In addition to those patient criteria, criteria must include that demonstration that the patient has been offered counseling regarding the test and potential results. The test performed includes at least the minimum genetic content, that means genes or genetic variants, with definitive or well-established guideline-based evidence as determined by ClinGen and the American College of Cardiology and the American Heart Association guideline for the diagnosis and management of aortic disease, required for clinical decision-making for its intended use that can be reasonably detected by the test. A single variant test may also be tested if it is the only variant considered to be reasonable and necessary for a patient, given that it is a known familiar variant. This test does not include additional genetic content that can be considered harmful to the patient. The testing does not conflict with any other applicable policy, specifically provisions of repeat germline testing defined in the LCD L38429. And this test has satisfactorily completed a technical assessment by Molecular Diagnostic Services Program. Are there any questions in regards to this proposed LCD?
If you have any comments and you are on a touch-tone phone, press *5 to raise your hand. Otherwise, those of you here on the computer can just unmute your mics. If you're having trouble unmuting your mic, click on the raise hand icon. All right, I see no raised hands at this time.
Hearing no comments, Dr. Nachatsky, can you go to the next LCD?
Thanks so much. Sure. The next proposed LCD is DL39987, which is the MoDEX molecular testing for identification and management of hereditary transthyretin amyloidosis. And at the end of this conference, I'll have everyone tested to see if they can say that 5 times quickly. The coverage for this one will cover molecular diagnostic test for use in the evaluation and the management of beneficiaries suspected of having hereditary transthyretin amyloidosis. Acronym for that is HATTR. When all of the following criteria are met. Number one, the patient has a clinical diagnosis of ATTR or has either A, cardiac features suggestive of ATTR cardiomyopathy and is of African American descent, or has a first degree relative with an HATTR diagnosis, or has at least one additional feature suggestive of HATTR according to expert consensus and society guidelines, or the patient has progressive sensoromotor and/or autonomic neuropathy and has a first-degree relative with HATTR diagnosis, or has, is someone speaking? Or has at least one additional feature suggestive of HATTR according to expert consensus and society guidelines. Other criteria are very similar to the other draft policy where the patient has been offered counseling regarding the test and the potential results. The results of the test will be used to aid in the treatment of decisions. The test performed includes at least the minimum genetic content, genes or genetic variants, with definitive or well-established guideline-based evidence required for clinical decision-making. The test does not include additional genetic content that could be considered harmful to this patient. A single variant test may be tested if that's the only variant considered to be reasonable and necessary for a patient that is with this known familiar variant. And the test has successfully completed, as stated before, a technical assessment that ensures that the test is reasonable and necessary. Any comments in regards to this proposed draft?
Once again, *5 to raise your hand if you're on a touch-tone phone, raise hand icon, or simply unmute yourself if you are on the call. All right, I see no comments, no raised hands at this time.
Hearing no comments, Dr. Nachotsky, can you go with your final LCD?
Sure can. Okay. Our last proposed draft is LCD DL 40022, and this is molecular diagnostic non-next generation sequencing test for the diagnosis of BCR-ABL negative myeloproliferative neoplasms. Now, this policy provides coverage for both multi-gene, non-next generation sequencing panel testing for the diagnostic workup of BCR-ABL negative myeloproliferative neoplasms, and it will also provide limited coverage for single gene testing of patients with BCR-ABL negative myeloproliferative neoplasms. Now, there is the classic BCR-ABL negative myeloproliferative neoplasms, which includes polycythemia vera, that's PF, essential thrombocythemia, ET, and primary myelofibrosis, PMF, as well as the non-classical BCR and B and ABL negative myeloproliferative neoplasms, which includes chronic neutrophilic leukemia and chronic eosinophilic leukemia not otherwise specified, among other rare entities. Please note that the myelodysplastic and myeloproliferative neoplasms are considered a separate class outside of the scope of this LCD. Any testing for myeloid and suspected neoplasms by next generation sequence is covered by a separate LCD, which is L38176. And I'll just refer to the group there's multiple in-depth criteria as outlined in this proposed draft, which I'll direct all the attendees to review if they want full details.
Thank you, Dr. Nachotsky, for the excellent summaries. Are there any comments?
Yes, I see Dr. Moscato has a comment. And he should be able to unmute himself.
I think it's unmuted. Yeah, I just have a comment. I mean, I like this, and these people are difficult. They're not common, but they're difficult to diagnose without a mutation. I was confused about your comment about it's not appropriate for myeloproliferative. This is a myeloproliferative disease, so I'm confused by your last comment about that other myeloproliferative diseases are covered by other LCDs. Could you explain that? I'm confused.
Sure. Okay. Because this coverage is for non-next generation sequences. That's why I was trying to make sure that you differentiated next generation sequencing is the, you know, the different tier levels of the testing. So this LCD will be proposed for non-next generation sequencing panel testing versus the other one where I was referencing is next generation sequencing, which is a different tier level of testing that can be done. And that's covered in a different LCD. So it's more in reference to the sequencing type of test versus non-sequencing testing.
Okay, yeah, because you need to, right, okay, because these single tests are often, you'll do them sequentially because you're looking for something abnormal and you're working your way down. Okay, that makes sense.
Sure.
Thank
You're welcome.
Mr. Staley, do we have any other comments?
One more time, *5 to raise your hand if you're on a touch-tone phone, or just click the raise hand icon. And I see no comments at this time.
Thank you so much for your comment. As a reminder, all comments will be compiled in a written response to comments document posted with the final LCDs. WPS would like to thank for all the comments. We do ask you to follow up any verbal comments in writing to the following emails: Medicare policy comments at wpsic.com or policy comments at wpsic.com. Dr. Stafford, back to you.
All right, thank you. This concludes the presentation and discussion of the proposed LCDs. I'd like to thank the public for attending, and you may disconnect now. After a moment, we'll continue the CAC with the members-only portion of the meeting where we're going to address contractor updates, projects, and provider engagement. So we'll give it just a minute here and let the public get disconnected.